supported by Vice Patron, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall. The Society continues through youth empowerment, education, to champion literacy, equality and inclusion, the environment and connected communities to achieve a fairer, more sustainable, more secure, more prosperous future for all 2.4 billion citizens of the Commonwealth. Our values and principles are shared in the Commonwealth Charter. RCS Wales was established in 2006 by my late father, Mr. P.K. Verma. He had come from India as a student, studied mining in Cardiff University and Doncaster, and had a career here in the collieries in Wales, working as a mining engineer. He became one of the first assistant managers of Asian origin. His career took him then around the Commonwealth to various countries, working as a mining engineer, eventually becoming a chief mining engineer in southern Africa. Settling back in Wales in the mid-80s, Dad worked with the community as he's always done, even in his student days, and he held positions as a university lecturer, a management consultant, justice of peace, and a school governor. My mum, she came from Italy. She had to leave her home country because of the war at Monte Cassino. This was a turning point for the war in her hometown. And she was very lucky to survive that and find a new home here in Wales. RCS Wales has been involved in a number of events over the years. Some of the main events yearly, we try to achieve our Commonwealth Day, generally held here at Cardiff Castle or the Mansion House, where we raise a flag. On occasion, we've been very lucky to attend the events in Westminster Abbey. Also, we've been very fortunate to hold a number of youth summits with students here in Wales, schools and colleges, supported by our colleague Debbie Field. And we've also been very happy to be partnered with the War Memorial for ethnic minorities, located in Alexander Gardens in Cardiff. Today we have a packed programme. We're honouring the contributions of servicemen and women from Commonwealth nations to the war efforts. Today and every day we remember your sacrifices and we honour you all. Just to let you know about some upcoming events, we have the impact of COVID-19 on ethnic minorities in Wales and RCS Wales efforts towards zero racism in May, as well as CHOGM, Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in June this year. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank RCS Wales members, Debbie Field, Uzua Wobi, Yessa, and my wife Shafali. So thank you all very much. Today we remember the commitment of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and Her Majesty the Queen to the Commonwealth, and we want to start by observing a minute's silence. So thanks everyone, thanks for joining in today, and thank you for all your support, communities and organisations. Over to you, Uzo.
Thank you so much to our Chairman, Rajiro Verma, for that brief overview of the work that we do. And now, as I previously mentioned, we have the Lord Lieutenants of all the areas of Wales. But as we are based in Cardiff, we felt it was appropriate to invite the Lord Lieutenant Morfydd Meredydd to give opening remarks and pay particular tribute on behalf of all of us for the life of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Thank you, Lord Lieutenant Morfydd Meredydd. Diolch yn fawr.
On behalf of all 8 Lord Lieutenants in Wales, I would like to thank the Royal Commonwealth Society in Wales for your invitation to join you today to mark Commonwealth Day 2021, especially this year when we are honouring the contribution. The Lieutenancy has always had strong links with the Commonwealth and the military, and I was privileged to have been present at the unveiling of the memorial stone in Alexandra Gardens, Cardiff, some 2 years ago, when I heard firsthand of the war experiences and sacrifices of so many from the Commonwealth nations. We will remember them. It was in view of today's topic, I thought that I should first mention his naval career. The Duke served with the Royal Navy throughout the Second World War. He spent time on battleship HMS Amesleys in the Indian Ocean, HMS Kent and HMS Shropshire in Ceylon, and HMS Valiant in the Mediterranean. He was in Wallace during the Allied invasion of Sicily. He was awarded the Greek War Cross of Valour. His genuine empathy and engagement with the Royal Navy continued throughout his life. The Duke led a long life of loyal and devoted support to Her Majesty the Queen, and of dedicated service to the nation and the Commonwealth. He will be remembered for his vision, integrity, enthusiasm, motivation, and humour. He championed a broad diversity of interests, including science, industry, sport, the environment, and the conservation of our natural world. He will be remembered for the support and encouragement he gave young people, especially through the Duke of Edinburgh's award, which has had a lasting impact on hundreds of thousands of young people. The Duke of Edinburgh supported Her Majesty the Queen with selfless devotion to duty through over 70 years of marriage, and in particular, in fulfilling her duties as head of the Commonwealth, during which time he served the Commonwealth family loyally and faithfully, and took a very special interest in it. The couple covered 40,000 miles during their 1953 coronation tour of the Commonwealth, who brought together countries and communities from across the world. The Duke remained constant and steadfast in his commitment to the Commonwealth and appreciated its importance. He was a pioneer in many ways. In 1956, he founded the Commonwealth Studies Conferences. These conferences continue today. He understood the challenges that lay ahead and how communication and cooperation were essential for sound relationships and for the good of mankind. As Her Majesty said of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, on their golden wedding anniversary, he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years. The Duke of Edinburgh will be missed by Her Majesty, his family, and the thousands or so organisations that he supported as patron, president, on inspiration. We offer our heartfelt condolences and sympathy to Her Majesty the Queen and the royal family.
Thank you so much to the Lord Lieutenant Morfydd Mered. And if you might request that we also film that speech and place it upon our website or through the Wi-Fi interruptions, we'll be able to get the full flavor of the full event. Lord Lieutenants who have joined us today, thank you. And next on our program, we're going to invite the contributions of the Royal British Legion, led by Anthony Metcalfe, to talk about the contributions of the Commonwealth to the armed forces and the society. Thank you, Ant.
Brilliant, thank you, Uzo. Can I just get a very quick comms check? Can you hear me okay? I can see lots of nodding heads in the modern Zoom world, so that's very good to hear. Thank you much indeed. Right, hopefully I'm going to have to share my screen now. Have you got my presentation as well? Can I just have clarity that you can see my slides?
Yes, it's all good, Ant.
Lovely. Thank you, Pete. Thank you much indeed. I can start now. So just to introduce myself, firstly, it's good to see you all, Lord Lieutenants, ladies and gentlemen, Armed Forces personnel and honoured guests. For those that don't know me, I'm Anthony Metcalfe and I am the Area Manager of the Royal British Legion here in Wales. And it's been my pleasure for the last couple of years to work side by side with the Royal Commonwealth Society and Race Council Cymru here in Wales on events and raising awareness around the sacrifice of the Commonwealth and Black and minority ethnic contributions to the war effort. So I'd just like to sort of start off by setting the scene, a little bit of context, if that's okay. So I'm showing my age here. So my childhood passion back in the 1980s was badly painting and building airfix models and sticking my fingers together with glue. I presumed that the Second World War was generally a European and a white man's war. This is probably reinforced by the image that I'm showing now of a box of British 8th Army soldiers from that era. However, in 1941, the 8th Army in Africa was only a quarter British and 3/4 then Imperial, not just Australians, Indians, New Zealand and South African troops, but also personnel from Ceylon, from Cyprus, from Gambia, the Gold Coast, Nigeria, Palestine, and Uganda, to name but a few. So as a kid in the 1980s, why did my Airfix soldier box only show white soldiers? It should have reflected the multicultural, multi-faith fighting force that it was. The Royal British Legion over the last few years, alongside many other organisations, has looked to counter that narrative from our Thank You campaign back in 2018 to Remember Together in 2019. I'm now going to give you a bit more context about the contributions of the two world wars from the Commonwealth nations. So when the First World War began in 1914, the then Empire, the Commonwealth, answered the call to support from all over the world, including, of course, pre-partition India, the Caribbean and Africa. Britain fought brutal and bloody battles in East Africa, Southern Africa, West Africa, and Egypt, in campaigns that are often overshadowed by, of course, the slaughter on the Western Front. Now, of course, these campaigns had a massive impact on the individuals and the nations that fought in them. It's a little known fact that 1 in every 6 soldiers of the British Empire during World War I was from Indian subcontinent, and over 400,000 of those were Muslims. India also sent 40 field ambulances, 6 clearing hospitals, 35 stationary hospitals, and 18 general hospitals, as well as almost 2,500 doctors and 720 nursing orderlies. However, at times, the Great War is often portrayed as a white European war, and the contribution, sacrifice, and dedication of those from the Commonwealth nations has been at times largely overlooked. For example, the British West Indian Regiment, which recruited from British Guiana and the Caribbean islands, had killed in action 185 members. A further 1,071 died of their illnesses, and 695 were wounded. They served in the Middle East, Palestine, and on the Western Front. They deserve as much recognition and respect as the next man. African troops also played a key role in containing the Germans in East Africa and defeating them in West Africa. Europeans and troops from the Indian subcontinent often struggled in the harsh climates, but the local population had the skills to survive and prosper. In November 1918, the British Army in East Africa was mainly composed of African soldiers. The units involved were West African Frontier Force, drawn from Nigeria, the Gold Coast, now Ghana, and Sierra Leone, and the King African Rifles recruited from Kenya, Uganda, and Malawi. At least 180,000 Africans also served in the Carrier Corps in East Africa, providing logistic support to troops at the front. Now, moving on to the Second World War. In June 1940, as we all know, Britain stood alone. Europe was in the hands of the Nazis, and the British Expeditionary Force had been pushed out of France. This is embedded in our public awareness by the now famous Evening Standard cartoon of June 1940. As we can see there, the plucky Tommy, fists clenched at the very channel and towards the Nazi oppressors in Europe, states, very well alone. But Britain was not alone. As one incoming telegram pointed out, don't worry, Barbados is with you. Or the Punch cartoon of July 1940, which poked fun at the earlier one, with 2 soldiers also looking out to sea. So our poor old empire is all alone, says the first. Yes, all 500 million of us, says the second. In 1940, we didn't stand alone. We may have been isolated as a nation, but of course we had the support, the raw materials, and the backing of over 500 million people from the Empire, now Commonwealth, at our backs. It must also be recognised that on the same day we declared war, so did Australia and New Zealand, and 3 days later, South Africa and then Canada. We mustn't also forget and recognise the fighting men from Europe, from France, Poland, who joined our war effort. And actually, it was a Polish fighter squadron that was the most successful in the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940. Moving on to the Far East, well, the famous 14th Army in the Far East, which is made up of Indians from every corner of the then Raj, Gurkhas from Nepal, Kenyans, Somalians, as well as men from Kent. And this 14th Army has the gruesome record of inflicting far more casualties on the Japanese than any other allied fighting force in the Second World War. By the end of the war in the Far East, Almost 6% of Admiral Mountbatten's Southeast Command was Indian, and 25% were from the African continent. In 1945, the British war effort was also supported by over 2.25 million Indian soldiers and a third of a million Africans. Almost 7,000 from the Caribbean had joined the RAF, and of course, countless more thousands had come across and served the Empire in the Merchant Navy, with many of them, unfortunately, paying the ultimate sacrifice. This slide here just demonstrates to me the impact of one nation, i.e. pre-partition India, in supporting Great Britain over the First and Second World Wars. And the fact that I did not realise until researching this presentation is that almost 40 soldiers have awarded the VC, the highest gallantry medal, a fact that I did not know, and I'm ashamed of that. I was now hoping to show you some recorded Veterans Voices presentations when we worked across VE and VJ 75 back in 2019. But what I'll do is I'll get that to share afterwards so you can watch all those videos, which is a really good asset as well. But of course, the Armed Forces relationship with the Commonwealth nations didn't stop in 1945. As we know, we draw many recruits in the Commonwealth, and we are actively looking always to recruit more. In 2019, the last stats I can find, the British Army was 4.5% Commonwealth, over 5,000 personnel serving in the Army alone. In total, almost 6,000 service personnel from the Commonwealth serve across the three services. They are an important and highly valued element of our modern armed forces. And in 2019, the Legion, as a campaigning organisation, has released a campaign we call Stop the Service Charge. This is aiming to remove the visa bills on Commonwealth forces who served over 3 years when they look to relocate in the UK with their families. And as you can see there, a service leaver with a partner and 2 children can often be placed with a bill of almost £10,000 to continue to live in the UK, despite their years of sacrifice and service to our nation. We, as an organisation that supports the armed forces community, thinks that is wrong. So we're looking to stop the service charge. What I'll do later in the chat box, I will show you the link to our campaigning pages around Stop the Service Charge. And there's an auto form that you can fill in, which will contact your local MP around the issues, and they can raise awareness for that. Also, as a welfare-based organisation, we support the armed forces community who've served 1 day or more, not just in the UK, but across the entire globe. And actually, when there was a hurricane in Fiji about 18 months ago, we supported many Fijian veterans who lived over there to rebuild their houses and their lives after that event. So we are, as an organisation, support all armed forces personnel across the globe that have served us 1 day or more. Hopefully I've helped set the scene there, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the more detailed presentations and awareness raising that's so important around this issue. Thank you, Uzo.
Diolch yn fawr. Ant Metcalf, thank you so much from the Royal British Legion. Can I just say that I'm sure Judge Ray Singh would be very delighted to hear that, because he's from Fiji, and hearing the work that you've done with many of the Fijian forces would bring him a lot of joy. Can I just now move swiftly on to the next contribution by the Royal Navy, and we have Lieutenant Commander Suzanne Lynch, who is going to talk about the contributions of the Commonwealth servicemen and women to the war efforts. Over to you, Suzanne.
Prynhawn, good afternoon, and thank you to the Royal Commonwealth Society of Wales for hosting this fantastic event. The Royal Navy is very proud of its Commonwealth history. We work closely with navies across the globe and have worked in partnership with Commonwealth navies for over 100 years. Our ships and personnel operate around the world. HMS Medway is currently deployed in the Caribbean, involved in disaster relief. Next month, we are excited that our flagship HMS Queen Elizabeth will deploy for 7 months, where she will visit the Mediterranean, the Gulf, the Indian and the Pacific Ocean, during which time she will work with Commonwealth navies and also visit many Commonwealth countries. The sailors and Marines that make your Royal Navy have a wide range of Commonwealth heritage. This is our Commonwealth message from our flagship HMS Queen Elizabeth.
Hallo, Nibai Kanelamun. G'day. Hello.
Hello.
How you is?
Goedemorgen.
Shemai.
Habari.
Obiahum to say.
Sakafet.
The Commonwealth has 54 member states.
The states are united by history, culture and shared values as enshrined in the Commonwealth Charter.
For many years, that spirit of common values has endured.
The Royal Navy and the Royal Marines are a rich melting pot of people from the Commonwealth states.
And this wonderful diversity across the Commonwealth could not be better represented here in HMS Queen Elizabeth. We have over 15 Commonwealth nations represented.
As a people, we share a history of working together and fighting alongside each other.
Our languages, our heritages, and our nationalities may be different,
but in the Navy, we are one crew
who eat, work, serve, and love together.
It is our diversity which gives us strength, a strength that cannot be measured.
Our collective experiences, knowledge, and talent makes us better in every way.
We all have aspirations, we all have something to give. We are part of something so much larger than ourselves, and we all serve in the Royal Navy.
Many uniform, one ship, one Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed to the Royal Navy, who are always very supportive of all the work that we do here in Wales. Really wonderful to see the diversity of people who serve and continue to serve in the Royal Navy. Thank you, Suzanne. And so now we're going to invite Captain Anthony Kironde Strain to give us the presentation from the British Army and messages of support from Commonwealth Heritage Services personnel. We have worked very closely with the British Army here in Wales, and lead engagement officer is Major Peter Harrison, but I know that Captain Kironde Strain is going to present today. Diolch yn fawr.
Hi, user. Thank you for those kind words. We are not quite ready for this part of the presentation. However, if Yasa has got the video lined up, we'd like to present members of the Royal Welsh and the Queen's Dragoon Guards as their Commonwealth messages. So Yasa, if you're ready, please.
Apologies, Major Peter. I think I must have jumped the gun. So apologies. Can we delay to when it comes to you?
No
if
problem.
You don't mind. Apologies, because I think I have jumped the queue myself. So after the Royal Navy, we were meant to have the greetings from the Ambassador of Lesotho, but they send their warmest regards to all of us today. We want to highlight that the coronavirus is a huge pandemic that is touching everybody around the world. So right now, we want to place a message that was brought to us by young people from the Black History Wales Committee, led by Ife Iwobi, who happens to be my daughter, and 6 other Black history artists who composed a tribute track to honor those who died serving in the Wales NHS and those who serve in the health sectors around the world. Those images that you see are people who are either living or have passed through the pandemic, and their families and themselves have sent the images for us to see. So please, now here, we won't forget as a tribute to the pandemic. And we particularly remember the Indian communities who are going through a terrible, terrible patch at this time. Thank you, Yasa.
You know exactly how I feel like. Wake up every morning, everything locked down like. My mother told me it gon' be alright. Keep that positive energy, good fortune come by your side.
R.I.P. to the fallen, lost house to Corona, and we won't surrender. We gotta stay together.
Just make it through this. Mask on, sanitize, stay home, we'll do it. Mask off, mask off, mask off, mask off. I just know we gon' make it through. I just know, I just know.
Trailblazers, not done yet. Broke boundaries, we won't forget. Our elders earned respect. Life's cut short, but we won't forget. Trailblazers, not done yet. Broke boundaries, we won't forget. Our elders earned respect. Life cut short, but we won't forget.
Try to stay positive in troubled times on road, but it's harder when you're losing friends, you know. I tell you it's a mad world we live in. Brothers all around us dying, mental health be kicking, but keep your head afloat, keep trying.
Better days are yet to come, so keep pushing, stay focused and don't give up.
Better days are yet to come, so keep pushing, stay focused and don't give up.
Put it back in me and enjoy the
Trailblazers, not done yet. Broke boundaries and we won't forget. Our elders and respect. Life's got short, but we won't forget. Trailblazers, not done yet. Broke boundaries and we won't forget. Our elders and respect. Life's got short, but we won't forget.
In honor of all those who died in the COVID-19 pandemic, we won't forget you. NHS workers, frontliners, trailblazers, we won't forget. Trailblazers, not done yet. Broke boundaries, we won't forget. Our elders earned respect. Life's cut short, but we won't forget.
Trailblazers, not done yet. Broke boundaries and we won't forget. Our elders and respect. Life's got short, but we won't forget.
Trailblazers, not done yet. Broke boundaries we won't forget.
Our elders and respect. Life's got short, but we won't forget.
And well said by our young people, individuals, all reflecting parts of the Commonwealth. I do agree with you, Deb. They deserve a massive cheer, and our NHS deserve a massive cheer. Many of you may have also suffered incredible loss in your home countries. It's wonderful to see our young Commonwealth contributors, their artists giving of their time and their creativity. So we do please ask that you convey our heartfelt condolences to people from your nations who may have passed during this pandemic and who are currently in hospitals, and a special thanks to all your medical services and personnel around the world who are helping to address and care for people in need. So right now, we're going to warmly invite the Home Development and the Muslim Council of Wales, led by Jamie Baker, who's the presenter, to give us a presentation on the contributions of people from diverse ethnic backgrounds who are Muslims, who gave a lot to the war efforts, and to commemorate generally the contributions of servicemen and women from diverse ethnic backgrounds around the 54 nations of the Commonwealth. Over to you, Jamie Baker. Thank you.
Okay, let me very briefly introduce this, just to say the slideshow. Actually, It's about the Commonwealth of Nations and what the spirit of it and what it stands for. And that's really important. At HDA, all we wanted to do was to acknowledge the Commonwealth. And because I tend to overspeak sometimes, the best way I could handle that was to put it on a narrative and a video that meant I could only take a certain amount of time. So if you're ready, yes, this is the video.
Between World War I and World War II, the British grip on its empire started to slide considerably. It was, up until that point, the greatest and largest empire that had ever did. But then in 1926, a Commonwealth was created with dominions of nations. In quote, the white nations of the empire. So the original Commonwealth was the British Commonwealth, was the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the Irish Free State and Newfoundland. Now, except for the UK, none of those countries were fully independent. They were dominions, which meant ultimately Britain could reclaim them if it so chose. But then the Commonwealth of Nations was formed in 1949, after World War II, when there were major changes across the British Empire, and countries that had participated in World War II, some because they chose to, such as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and others because they found themselves at war, like the Caribbean and countries in Africa, countries, I should say, that were not fully countries at that point. So in the time period between World War II and 1960, an awful lot changed. And an awful lot of countries became independent. And that's important, because the Commonwealth of Nations is about independence. It's about countries that become nations. I very nearly said for the first time in their history, but of course many of them were independent nations in real terms before they became part of the British and, in some cases, other empires. So although we could say the Commonwealth of Nations is really important in its own right, after all, it's 54 members, 2.4 billion people, a third of the Earth's population are members of the Commonwealth of Nations. Its significance is also in relation to its role as the very first thing, the very first organisation that countries join becoming independent, on becoming nations. This is just a run through of the countries, the slideshow, who have become and who are the Commonwealth of Nations. Flags and the nations you'll see on this slideshow, what we tried to show you is their very first official leader, whether elected or as a monarch, ultimate or symbolic. But you have to realise the change in the world that the Commonwealth of Nations was a central part of. So you've got the end of World War II, and in theory, Republic of South Africa, Canada, Australia, Commonwealth of Australia, the Republic of India and New Zealand were independent nations. Actually, their rules didn't ultimately change until, in some cases, 1982, when the right to change the constitution of Australia was removed. So prior to 1950, and we'll include Pakistan with India, there were 6 former British Empire countries that were independent nations. Then in 1957, Ghana, the Republic, and Malaysia. Then in 1960, the Republic of Cyprus, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 61, the Republic of Sierra Leone, Jamaica and Rwanda, and the independent state of Samoa all became independent. In 62, as did the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the Republic of Uganda. Now, Rwanda was important because Rwanda was actually part of the Belgian Empire, but it chose to be part of Commonwealth nation. Samoa was actually ruled by New Zealand. Then in the rest of the 60s, we had the Republic of Kenya, Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Republic of Malawi, Republic of Malta, the United Republic of Tanzania, the Republic of Zambia, the Republic of the Gambia, the Maldives, the Singapore, Barbados, the Republic of Botswana, and the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Kingdom of Lesotho, and the Kingdom of Eswatini. And it's kind of important that people hear that word, Eswatini, because it's still said in many newspapers here, Swaziland, even though the name was changed in 1970. The Republic of Mauritius and Nauru and Tuvalu, they were also in the 60s. Nauru was part of the German Empire. It then switched to the League of Nations after World War II and then was administered from Australia, but it became independent. 70s, we've got Fiji, Tonga, Bangladesh, which of course was which independence was from Pakistan. Cameroon, became independent from Germany, then France and UK. Sri Lanka, Bahamas, Grenada, Mozambique, which was the first non-British Empire connected nation to become part of the Commonwealth of Nations. It was a Portuguese Empire country. Papua New Guinea, which was Australian, the Seychelles, Dominica, Solomon Islands, Kiribati, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, the important point about this is there was a movement, and after World War II, over 100 countries became independent. But them have joined, 53 I should say, have joined the Commonwealth of Nations. One of the 54th, of course, is the United Kingdom. And the final ones I haven't mentioned are Vanuatu, Barbuda, Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, the nation of Brunei, the abode of peace, that's its full title, and Namibia, the Republic of Namibia, which became independent from South Africa. What's important about all these nations, obviously, is independence. But what's important about the Commonwealth of Nations is the scale of what we're talking about in terms of democracy. Now, I've said there are 54 members, 2.4 billion people. Now, in there you've got a massive country with a population of over in India. And then you've got tiny, tiny places like Vanuatu and Kiribati. And of course you've got the original British Empire in the United Kingdom, including the United Nations, where the largest original members have a veto over some decisions, the Commonwealth of Nations is one vote per nation. It doesn't care whether you have 1 billion or 75,000 in your population. You still only get one vote. And that's why the Commonwealth is important to its members. Now, we mentioned the 2 world wars, and events helped shape the future of the Commonwealth. Promises were made during the wars, and independence was a factor. We won't say whether or not those promises were honoured, but independence was in the end achieved. Sadly, what we have recently is a concern. Commonwealth war graves. The report of the Special Committee to review historical inequalities in commemoration. This is vitally important to nations. Whether it's my family from Barbados or colleagues' families from Somalia. That report estimates that between 45,000 and 54,000 casualties, predominantly Indian, East African, West African, Egyptian and Somali personnel, were not commemorated equally. Now, when I say that, generally everybody should have their headstone honouring them somewhere. A further 116,000 casualties, predominantly but not exclusively East African and Egyptian personnel, but potentially as many as 350,000 were not commemorated by name, or possibly not commemorated at all. Now, the report is a very honest report. It identifies administrative errors and prejudiced attitudes as playing a significant role, saying that these attitudes belonged to British imperial governments, including the War Office and Colonial Office. Now, we need to be clear. Commonwealth war graves have responded entirely positively to the report, accepting its criticism and committing to giving due respect to all of those who sacrificed their lives in those world wars. Their role, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, their role is, in quotes, "We honour and care for the men and women of the Commonwealth forces who died in the First and Second World War, ensuring they will never be forgotten." Sadly, the report actually shows they were never remembered. And this address, which is very relevant for Wales, merchant seamen, a vital part of the war, as they were civilians. And all records showing which were merchant seamen died in World War I were destroyed by the British government in 1919. But what is truly significant and shows the spirit of the Commonwealth of Nations is that the past and negative experiences and negative treatment does not shape the Commonwealth. It cannot shape its future. It does not live in the past. It works to grow a future for its member nations and a third of the world's population. And that's important. No matter how difficult it is for each nation to maintain sometimes its own democracy or forms of democracy, the Commonwealth of Nations does what it can to move forward and to help its members to do just that. Now, from a group that was independent, who became independent nations, a hugely important block of nations who over the next decades have the potential to become very significant. So the role of the Commonwealth of Nations is important. And on a personal level, I have Barbados. Even though I see myself as Welsh, administrative hub as it is always a part of the Commonwealth. And that means that those nations have a network that not just helps them, but in a one eye on the nature of their democracies. And that can only be positive. We hope HDA hope this has given you an inkling of how we feel.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. And spot on time. Thank you very much. So right away, we're going to invite the first of our ambassadors, the ambassador from Cyprus, who has joined us kindly today to bring his country's greetings to and mention the contributions to the war effort, Mr. Andreas Kakouris. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you, Professor Iwobi, Lord Lieutenants, members of the Royal Commonwealth Society of Wales, Armed Forces personnel, distinguished guests from around the Commonwealth. It is a great pleasure and honour for me to be part of this inaugural Commonwealth Day commemoration, celebrating the shared history, values and aspirations of our Commonwealth as found in the Commonwealth Charter, a rich mosaic of countries and peoples spanning the globe. A family of nations whose value added is, I believe, becoming increasingly visible and appreciated in addressing the many challenges before us today. If I may allow me to echo the comments of the Lord Lieutenant in paying tribute to and honouring the memory of His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, his decades of service to, enthusiasm for, and unbridled commitment to the Commonwealth family at the side of Her Majesty the Queen will be sorely missed. Ladies and gentlemen, this year marks 60 years since Cyprus became a member of the Commonwealth, having joined shortly after its independence in 1960, and it's been an active member ever since. What I believe is not widely known, and this is why today's event is all the more important, is the significant contribution of Cypriots to the Allied forces' efforts during the two world wars. And if I may allow me in broad brushstrokes to shed some light on this contribution. During the Great War, 16,000 Cypriots served alongside British and other Allied troops on the Macedonian front, equivalent to approximately 25% of the Cypriot male population of military age of the time. Some 3,500 mules and 3,000 horses were also involved, comprising the Macedonian Muleteer Corps, which provided crucial logistical support to the Allied war effort. The Cypriot Muleteers were tasked with supplying the front, working on road construction and carrying injured soldiers back. A largely untold, yet I believe meaningful story. Indeed, such was the contribution of the Cypriot Muleteers that they were in demand again in the Second World War. Cypriots were amongst the first to join the British forces as soon as Britain declared war in September 1939. The Cyprus Regiment was established 1 month later in October 1939, and the Cyprus Volunteer Force in June 1940. Equally impressive and necessary to recall was the participation of 778 Cypriot women joining the Auxiliary Territorial Service and the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. In total, more than 20,000 Cypriots joined the war effort. The men and women of the Cyprus Regiment served on several fronts. Muleteer corps were deployed in France as early as January 1940, seeing action at Dunkirk. Later, Cypriots took part in operations in continental Greece, in Crete in northern Africa, Egypt, and Libya, at the Battle of Keren in Abyssinia, and in Italy at the Battle of Monte Cassino. 2,000 Cypriots were held prisoners, including former President of the Republic of Cyprus, Glafkos Glididis, whose RAF bomber was shot down in Germany in 1942. 374 Cypriot volunteers paid the ultimate sacrifice while serving. Their tombs can be traced to 72 Commonwealth war graves in Italy, Egypt, India, Singapore, Czech Republic, Israel, and elsewhere. As Her Majesty the Queen so poignantly commentated in her speech at Portsmouth on the 75th D-Day Remembrance event, many of them would never return, and heroism, courage, and sacrifice of all who lost their lives will never be forgotten. This is why it is so important to remember and honor the memory of all those who fought, served, and paid the ultimate sacrifice, as well as to reaffirm our commitment to the causes and values they fought for. Dear friends, in December 2019, the Cyprus High Commission launched a photographic exhibition, Wars Forgotten, in cooperation with the Bank of Cyprus Cultural Foundation and the British Royal Legion. Commemorating the 75th anniversary since the end of World War II, the photographs of Dimitris Vatis and the interviews by Natasha Georgiou brought to light a proud generation of Cypriots from all ethnic backgrounds and walks of life who fought against fascism for freedom and democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, I would be remiss if I did not mention the vital support that the Commonwealth has offered to the Republic of Cyprus in the aftermath of the 1974 Turkish invasion and occupation in the form of vital technical assistance and support. In addition, hundreds of Cypriots benefited from Commonwealth scholarships, enabling them to study or advance their studies in Commonwealth countries. But more importantly, and as demonstrated at every Commonwealth Heads of State and Government meeting, the Commonwealth family collectively expresses its solidarity and support for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Republic of Cyprus and for the reunification of the island in a bizonal, bicommunal federation. In closing, I would like to thank the Royal Commonwealth Society of Wales for the kind invitation to contribute to this meaningful event, and I look forward to a future occasion to visit Wales and celebrate Commonwealth Day in person. Thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr, Ambassador. That would be Welsh for thank you. And we are absolutely thrilled to hear your speech and to recognize those contributions that you so ably put forward. And we look forward to warmly welcoming you to Cardiff, which is our capital, as you know, with a nice plate of Welsh cakes or barabrith, if you're lucky, which I'm sure the British Legion will be happy to supply, and Royal Navy, as I go to them often. So we're very, very delighted to welcome you and to thank you and ask that you extend the greetings of the Royal Commonwealth in Wales to all your country and your service personnel as well. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
And now we're going to go straight over to the British Army, and they're going to present their commentary and videos to highlight the work that members of the the Commonwealth in general do within the armed forces of the UK. So over to Major Peter Harrison for this presentation. Diolch yn fawr, Major Peter.
Thank you, Uzo, and thank you very much for the kind invitation to participate in the Royal Commonwealth Day commemoration. Before they introduce the videos, just to let you know that the British Army, along with its sister services of the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force, are here to protect the nation in order to prevent conflict. fight our nation's adversaries, but also deal with disasters. And you'll have seen plenty of our service personnel making a massive contribution to the fight against COVID here in the UK. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce some of our Commonwealth heritage soldiers who are supporting us in this battle. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
I am Fizelis Ndongo, a soldier in British Army in a World War from Namibia.
Bolovinaka, my name is Corporal Tukan, serving under 1st Queen's Dragoon Guards. I'm from Fiji, joined the army since 2008 and serving under HQ Squadron Esquimals.
I am Fujilial Singh. I am serving with 1st Battalion Royal Welsh. I am originally from India.
Morning, my name is Major Nathan Cronick. I'm currently serving as OCA Kennedy with 1st Battalion Royal Welsh, born and raised in Alberta, Canada.
Hi, I'm Staff Sergeant Pope, currently the LSD Support Detachment Commander, serving with the 1st Queen's Dragoons Guards, and I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, serving in the Army 18 years now.
My name is Captain Anthony Chironde Strain. I'm the Regimental Adjutant for the Royal Welsh, and my family are from Uganda.
Hello, Bula. I am Private Gumigutia. I'm with the 1st Queen's Dragoon Guards, Welsh Cavalry, and the LSD Department with the HQ Squadron. I am from the Fiji Islands, and I'm with the Army. I've been with the Army for 4 years now. Naka.
Thank you, Uzo. And now back to you.
Diolch yn fawr, Peter. Thank you so much. We're delighted to see the fantastic work that members of the Commonwealth do within the British Armed Forces and here in Wales as well. We are thrilled to say that we have just been joined by the ambassador from Lesotho, Nkopani Thabane. You're warmly welcome, and we hope that when you've settled in, you might be able to bring a little brief greeting from Lesotho, representing the African nations. Thank you so much. Okay, and right now we're going to go over to, oh, there we are. Welcome, Ambassador. Please feel free to say a few words.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chair. It is actually the First Secretary at the office. I'm afraid the High Commissioner could not be available today. However, I'll be representing her on this occasion. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much. We're delighted that you could come because we were told you might not be able to join us. We warmly welcome you. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go right over now to the memory and memorial tribute to Patty Flynn, the Black History Race Council Cymru Black History patron for Wales, who fought for 26 years when I met her in 2019 to have a monument erected to honor the contributions of ethnic minority servicemen and women. She sadly passed away after battling for those 26 years, having had the monument installed in Alexander Gardens in November 2019, sadly passed away. So on the 10th of September 2020, her family have sent a statement for us to read, a little bit about who Patty was and some of her experiences of losing 5 members, every single male member of her family, to the war efforts. And she starts, she's written a book called Born Down My Tiger Bay, a kaleidoscope of memories by Patty Flynn. I was 2 years old, the youngest member of our Young's family of 8 when World War II began, and 8 years old in my mother's sadly diminished family of 5 when the war finally ended. My father, Wilmot George Young, was a merchant seaman from the coastal town of Santa Maria in north of island of Jamaica. The cargo ships that he worked on often docked in the busy port of Cardiff Bay. It was here that he met my mother, Beatrice Maud Silva from Canton. Mom worked in service for Mr. and Mrs. Ugarte, a Spanish family who ran a very popular restaurant on George Street, where many of the seamen enjoyed their meals when their ships docked for a few days to unload and load their cargo in the Cardiff port. Mom and Dad married and settled in the multiracial community of Tiger Bay, where they had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. We lived in a share house on Sophia Street in Cardiff Docks, where I was born. I was a year old when we moved from our shared home on Sophia Street to our very own 3-bedroom house on Pomeroy Street. The house was given to my mother by her eldest brother, Albert. It had a large attic, an underground concrete cellar, a backyard garden, while during the war, a corrugated air raid shelter was erected. It had a front porch and a small walled garden, and a gate and iron railings. My brave mother later told me that she thought her dreams had been fulfilled when we were given the key to a house of our own. Unfortunately, it was only 1 year after settling in that the Second World War began, and her dreams began to shatter. But through all those years of heartache, her love and spirit remained strong. When Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain announced in September of 1939 that Great Britain was at war with Germany, it came as a great shock to the nation, and many women cried in anguish at the thought of what was to come. 6 years later, in 1945, when the voice of Winston Churchill announced over the wireless that victory was ours, the many war widows, mothers and sisters and brothers, including those in my family, again wept at what had transpired during those 6 long, devastating years of terror, destruction, and loss. The Second World War had deprived me of a wonderful father and 2 courageous brothers. It left my grief-stricken mother a war widow, my 2 elder sisters devastated, my sister-in-law of just 6 months, a broken-hearted widow, and my 13-year-old brother, Wilmot, sad and lost, without his 2 elder brothers who were his heroes. Wilmot was my big brother by 5 years. I do not think he realized that he was my hero. Most of the men in our multiracial docks community were merchant seamen who worked as crew on the ships that left the industrious Cardiff docks with cargo of Welsh coal, steel and slate to be exchanged for supplies from other friendly seaports around the world. During the war, these cargo ships were unescorted without any form of defense system. They were therefore prime targets for the deadly torpedoes fired from German boats silently hiding just above the ocean bed along the trade routes and especially in the North Atlantic Ocean. Every food-carrying cargo ship that was torpedoed brought the British Isles closer to the state of starvation and also often robbed our docks community of the main family wage earners, fathers, sons, and brothers. Not being quite sure at our age what the war had been about, when peace was declared, we younger children went running around the streets, waving flags and singing, "We won the war, we won the war." But only the grown-ups knew the real tragic loss of it all. My poor grieving mother cried and said, "We may have won the war, but at what price?" My mother's happy family had been sadly reduced by the loss of her merchant seaman husband, my dad, Wilmot George Young, when his ship, the Ocean Vanguard, that was bringing much needed resources to the UK, was torpedoed on the 12th of September 1942. Just 1 year after the tragic loss of my brother Jocelyn, who had been reported missing at sea in 1941. Our Jocelyn had signed on to work on a Japanese cargo ship trading at Cardiff docks, as Japan was one of our allies. But much to my family's horror, a few months later, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Therefore, Japan also became our enemy. The British War Office tried to contact all the ships that had left the British docks, but communication between Japan and the UK had been severed. Although America then joined our war, still the weeks, months, and years went by as the battle raged on, but no word was ever heard again from our wonderful Jocelyn, and great sorrow continued to target our family. The final blow came 6 months before the end of the war, on the 30th of July, 1945. It was then that my 21-year-old brother, Arthur Young, a wireless operator and sergeant in the British Royal Air Force, was killed with the rest of the crew when their plane caught fire and crashed in a playing field behind the streets of Salford. The Royal Lancaster plane of 106 Squadron was returning from an aborted mission over France when it suffered damage over Normandy. Arthur had only just gained his wings during that very same week. It must have been blind faith and hope that helped my mother and others like her to survive the years of that bitter war. Oh yes, we may have won the war, but millions of people lost the battle. That was Patty's story, which she told me with tears, that despite the contributions her family, the loss of her family and so many like her, just in Tiger Bay, over 200 families had never been recognized, were not allowed to march down the streets of Cardiff. She campaigned for the erection of that monument at Alexander Gardens. I joined her fight. Race Council chairperson, Judge Ray Singh, joined her fight, and the Royal Commonwealth Society, the British Legion, the Armed Forces, all the British forces, we joined hands together with the Welsh government and my boss, Jane Hott, the Deputy Minister and Chief Whip, insisted that it had to be corrected. And she contacted the people in Cardiff Council, who immediately implemented what she had asked for over 26 years. Patty unveiled that monument at Alexander Gardens in November 2019. Sadly, almost exactly 1 year later, she passed away very suddenly at age 83 to cancer. We were devastated that she didn't see the very end, even the first year of that anniversary. But I remembered Patty hugging that stone and saying, I now believe that if I go in peace, knowing that Wales has apologized for the omission and has remembered my family and many like mine. So we honor her legacy. Patty Flynn, rest in peace. Thank you very much. And now we are going to have a message from the Honorable Consul of India, Raj Agarwal, OBE, who has attended today to represent the Indian subcontinent. Over to you, Honorable Consul Raj Agarwal.
Thank you, Uzo. We are truly blessed today to have such special representation and participation. A big thank you to the chairman of RCS, Rogero, Uzo, yourself, Major Harrison, and all the organizers for today's event. You've already heard about the contribution of India, but I must reinforce some of the facts. More than 1 million Indian soldiers served in World War I as part of the British India Army, and more than 74,000 died in this conflict. In World War II, more than 2.5 million Indians fought, the largest volunteer force in the world history. It is vitally important to honor India's role in fighting fascism in Singapore, Africa, Europe, and their largely forgotten war in Burma. The Second World War cost the lives of 87,000 Indian soldiers and wounded nearly 35,000 of them. Really, really sad. In recognition of their service, nearly 4,000 gallantry decorations were awarded to Indian soldiers, including about 33 Victoria Crosses. The legacy of the British Indian Army is that they played a vital role in conflict against fascism. They fought for freedom from dictatorial and genocidal regimes. In many ways, they helped ensure that India would enter after independence would be dominated by democracy and liberal forces. After 76 years, it is time that we acknowledge the sacrifice fully of all those who served and the families and the loved ones. It is vitally important we recognize the families and the loved ones who kept everyone together during these difficult times. They shared both the bad and the good news with everyone in the community. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Consul of India, Captain Raj Agarwal. We warmly receive your message and pay appropriate tribute to the Indian contribution, the Commonwealth contributions from the Indian subcontinent. And also please extend our warmest greetings to all those who battle the pandemic in India today. We can see the news and it is indeed very worrying. And now we invite the Royal Air Force, Warrant Officer Steve Perham, to give his force's message to everyone. Warm welcome to you, Croeso, Steve Perham.
Thank you, Uzo. Good afternoon, Lord Lieutenants, High Commissioners, Ambassadors, Sirs, Ma'ams, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, on behalf of the Royal Air Force, I'd like to sincerely thank our colleagues from the Royal Commonwealth Society of Wales for providing us this opportunity to share and celebrate and honour our incredible servicemen and servicewomen of the armed forces, both past and present. We have many heroes and heroines representing all Commonwealth countries throughout our history. Some received the accolades they so rightly deserved and are cast in stone for others to acknowledge and admire, yet there are so many thousands of unsung heroes who have served and continue to serve from across our Commonwealth, all helping to secure our safety and freedom. Before I introduce some of our serving personnel, I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight from World War II alone, just a few of our incredible RAF servicemen and women. Squadron Leader Philip Louis Ulrich Cross, originally from Trinidad, is probably one of our most decorated Caribbean airmen who flew 80 missions over Germany as a navigator on 139 Jamaica Squadron. And then we have Flight Lieutenant Emmanuel Peter John Adeni Thomas, originally from Nigeria, and he decided to fight for freedom by joining the Royal Air Force. He travelled from Nigeria to the United Kingdom to enlist in 1942 and became the first Black African to qualify as a pilot and commissioned officer. Then we have in 1941, leading aircraftswoman Lillian Bader of Barbadian heritage. She became one of the first Black women out of 100 female volunteers from the Caribbean to join the Women's Royal Auxiliary Air Force, where in 1941 she trained as an instrument repair specialist, working on Airspeed Oxford light bombers. And then there's Squadron Leader Mahinder Singh Puji, DFC, who was one of the first Indian Sikh pilots to fly in all three major theatres of World War II. Flying mainly Hurricanes, he began active duty in 1941, and during his service, he escorted many bomber offences over occupied France, as well as many patrols and operations in defence of Britain. These are just a few examples of inspirational individuals who all made the incredible contributions when our country needed them. And so do our current serving personnel, some of whom have shared their messages for you today on Commonwealth Day. Thank you. I'm Warrant Officer Steve Perrin, and I work for the recruiting headquarters at Royal Air Force College Cranwell, and I am of British heritage. It's an honour that the Royal Commonwealth Society of Wales have provided us with this opportunity to pay a tribute to servicemen and servicewomen of Commonwealth heritage, both past and present, for their selfless sacrifice, dedication and commitment to serving in the armed forces.
I'm SEC Eunice Hilton. I'm currently serving at Royal Air Force Nottingham, and I'm proud to be of Jamaican descent.
I'm Wing Commander Manjit Singh Gatora, serving at Air Command, Royal Air Force High Wycombe, and I am proud to be of Indian heritage.
Hi, I'm Corporal Miller. I'm based at the Armed Force Careers Office in Lincoln, and I'm proud to be of Jamaican heritage.
I am Squadron Leader Joan Ochoa, serving at Royal Air Force Odium, and I'm proud to be of Kenyan heritage.
I am Flight Sergeant Neil Strickland, serving at Royal Air Force Cranwell, and I'm proud to be of Jamaican heritage.
I am Sergeant Pascal Zigambo, serving at Royal Air Force Malta, and I am of Malawian heritage.
I'm Sergeant Siobhan Bramley from Recruiting and Selection at RAF Cranwell, and I'm proud to be of Jamaican heritage.
I'm Wing Commander Fred Wigglesworth, serving at Creech Air Force Base, Nevada, USA, and I'm proud to be of Kenyan and Ugandan heritage.
It's absolutely wonderful. It's just so enriching and so warm to see the diversity of the people from the Commonwealth continuing, even today, to work within the Royal Air Force and all the other British Armed Forces, and a real show of strength there. I'm sure Brother Chris Campbell from the chair of the Southwest Jamaican Society will be particularly excited to see so many from Jamaica amongst you. So that's wonderful. That's great. Thank you, Steve. And now we're going to go over to a message on behalf of the Ambassador of Canada, here in person represented by Brigadier General Paul Doyle. And a big warm welcome to you and your cat as well. We've seen a little bit of your cat.
Yeah. Can you hear me all right? Your Excellency, Kukuris, Lord Lieutenants, Mr. Verma, Professor, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today on behalf of our High Commissioner, Mr. Ralph Goodale, who arrived in post yesterday, so is new in the job. But I am going to be talking to you about Canada's experience in the First and Second World War, fighting alongside our Commonwealth allies. I'm Brigadier General Paul Doyle. I'm the Canadian Defence Advisor here at the High Commission of Canada in London. I'm a member of the Royal Canadian Air Force, and I am a pilot, having flown for a few years, but now I have the opportunity and the privilege to represent my nation, Canada, here in the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. Canada entered World War I on the 4th of August 1918 upon declaration of the war. And just to note that at the time, Newfoundland was not part of Canada. So I will be talking about the contributions that Newfoundland had both in the First and Second World War, not having joined Canada until 1949. The first Canadian troops arrived in Europe into France in December of 1914. And they were soldiers from the regiment that was raised privately, which was the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, out of primarily Western Canada, that came across, as I said, to France in December of 1914. During the totality of the First World War, 650,000 Canadians and Newfoundlanders entered the war. Almost 3,000 Canadian nursing sisters served in the military, as well, and amongst them, amongst those 650,000, were 4,000 members of the Indigenous nations of Canada who came across to fight also, primarily in Northwest Europe, where our troops were deployed. Troops from Newfoundland fought in Gallipoli, and then into Northwest Europe. And the primary battles that we saw as Canadians were in such famous battles of Neufchâtel, the Second Battle of Ypres, the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, and then the 100 Days. The thing that I'll note about Vimy Ridge is that it was during the experience of the Battle of Vimy Ridge in 1917 that many people say that Canada was forged on those battlefields. That is when Canadian were able to stand up as a independent country and be recognized for that. In April of 1917 was the first time that the 4 Canadian divisions that were in France at the time fought under the command of Lieutenant General Currie as a corps. And from there, with the Australian Corps, made a name for themselves that when our adversaries on the other side of the wire knew that the Australians and the Canadians were around, they knew that that an offensive was close by. The Royal Canadian Navy was formed in 1911, shortly before the start of the First World War, and saw service both in the Pacific and also in the Atlantic. And the primary roles in the Atlantic that ships from the Royal Canadian Navy had were for convoy escorts, making sure that the supplies, the foodstuffs, industrial goods were continuing to flow from the United States and Canada into Great Britain, and also into the battlefields in Europe. You know that we in Canada have a large country. We have a lot of natural resources, so a lot of the raw goods and foodstuffs that help sustain the warfight against the Germans came from Canada. Canadian pilots and members of the Royal Flying Corps served throughout Europe, in France, and also in Italy, and with some who served also in the Middle East. And it was at the end of the war, prior to the end of the war, at the beginning of November 1918, when the Canadian Air Force was first stood up with a squadron, number 1 squadron, that eventually came back to England in 1940 and fought in the Battle of Britain out of RAF Northolt alongside the Polish squadron and 303 squadron that was mentioned earlier in the presentation, talking about service in the Battle of Britain. When we fast forward to look through to the Second World War, Canada entered the war on the 10th of September 1939, following a declaration of war, following a debate in our House of Commons. And it was the independent policy of the Canadians that brought us into the Second World War. The Royal Canadian Navy saw service again throughout the North Atlantic on convoy patrols, also up in the Arctic Arctic convoys into Russia, throughout the Mediterranean, and into the Pacific also for ships of the Royal Canadian Navy that were part of the Royal Naval Fleet that were fighting against the Japanese Empire in 1944 and 1945. The Canadian Army first saw service in 1940 in France, landing in Brest near the end of the Battle of France, and then reconstituted back in the United Kingdom with all of its kit. So actually following the evacuation of Dunkirk until the buildup of forces, the Canadian troops who were in the United Kingdom were amongst the only troops here in the UK that were fully equipped and ready to fight should an invasion take place. Service continued throughout the Second World War. Some notable areas that Canadians served in were in Hong Kong in 1941, where the where a regiment from Winnipeg fought in that battle in December of 1941, and then Canadian troops in 1942 went ashore in Dieppe, and in 1943 Italy, and then of course in 1944 throughout Northwest Europe, and eventually ending the war in Germany. The Royal Canadian Air Force made a large contribution, I would argue an outsized contribution for Canada's presence in the Second World War, with numerous fighter, intruder, and bomber squadrons having fought in the Second World War. 120,000 aircrew were trained in Canada for the war effort, of whom half of them were Canadians. And overall, in Canada, from Canada, more than 1 million served in the Second World War. And one thing I didn't mention was that in the First World War, we had approximately 10% of our soldiers were killed. We had a further 172,000 wounded. And then in the Second World War, similar numbers to what we saw. So between the two wars, over 100,000 Canadians were killed in action, and we had approximately 200,000 who were wounded. So at what price did victory come? Linking back to one of the previous presentations that you had. We know that we are a proud member of the Commonwealth. We continue to serve alongside our friends, colleagues, and allies around the world in operations throughout Africa. We have served with pride alongside members of the Commonwealth in the conflict in Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world, that we stand with pride for what the Commonwealth represents. And for us, I am very proud to be able to give a short synopsis of the Canadian experience in the Second World War and the First World War. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to do so.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Brigadier General Doyle. A really comprehensive overview of your contributions. I wonder if your office would send through the contents, because as we put in our letter to all the ambassadors, we're creating resources for school children to know what the Commonwealth have contributed and how all the nations are reflected. So if we could have your presentation via email, that could be incorporated into this booklet that we're creating. And that applies to all the other representatives of different nations here today. Thank you so much. Right, we're off to Newport in Wales, and we're going to talk to Rebecca Eversley-Dawes, who's done a really brilliant piece of work collecting the information about those who served in the wars from Merchant Sea who docked in Newport. Over to you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you, Uzu. I'd just like to say good afternoon and thank you for having me. For those of you who missed my introduction, I'm an archaeologist based in Newport, and following my postgrad, I had a lot of time and due to personal circumstance, I was talking to a lot of individuals within the community of Newport, and they were sharing their stories with me. Anyone knows, if you're a historian, archaeologist, people bring you their history, interesting pieces of information that you might want to look into. And one of the key pieces of information that people wanted to share was the story of the Merchant Navy in Newport. And many individuals felt that, although we have 2 memorials now, they felt that their relatives weren't being represented. And like Patty Flynn said, there was many families who felt that they weren't on those memorials, and we had no way of finding anything out. So that was the key for us, was to start researching and recording the Merchant Navy. But on a personal note, many of our families, being from the Pilgrimsley area, had migrations in their families that we wanted to represent, and many of them maybe had 4 or 5 different migration stories within one household, for example. So I'll just show you Ben. I won't keep you long, but this is who we're based on. My tech is cutting out, so I just thought I'd bring you the poster. But this is Ben Johnson, and he was one of the sons of a chief from Liberia. So he's one of a migration of many thousands of men who came over on Elder Dempster lines to Liverpool, and who then came down to Newport and to Wales on foot, and settled in South Wales. So we wanted to record this migration. So we have literally spent the last 12 years recording each individual and their family story. And we've just created a book, which, oh, thank you, we've got my slides up. So we've just created a book and a publication, just sort of exampling some of the individuals. So just to give you an idea, you can see on the screen, we've got Bill. Now, Bill is actually of Caribbean descent, and he was brought up in Cuba, ended up in Cardiff. He was a merchant seaman, but his story is important to us because actually he was born and bred. He wouldn't say he was born and bred in London, but his early years was in London. But he actually was arrested at the height of apartheid in South Africa, and had such an amazing story. And I think we're going to do a book on himself. Have we got another slide there, just quickly, just so I can show? Like, this is the scene of the race riot. So very, very quickly, many of the Africans were attacked here in this street, and we looked at who were the Africans. And that was a key point of our project, was we didn't want to use the words they anymore, and we didn't want to use the Africans, the Irish, the mud crawlers, all those names that sort of come with commemoration. So it's vital to our project that we actually use families to tell stories, and people like Patty Flynn and others, even in Cardiff, have contacted us to sort of help us, because we want to tell it from the perspective of the individuals themselves. And in Newport, I mean, we're lucky to have so many, I say thousands of merchant seamen represented, but we've also got Roy Dickinson, who was he was on the HMS Formidable in World War II, and we're going to focus on him a little bit more in future projects. We've got John Acty, who was warrant officer for the RAF, based in Cardiff, but he had connections to Newport, and it's just really bringing everything to light, but also to provide a research service. And I'm in work in museums myself, but we are using our resources within museums to help individuals record their own story and identify things that maybe they've got that they don't know anything about. So maybe you've got a shipbook and you don't understand it, or maybe you've got an artifact in your home, like the poster that I've just shown, that maybe you don't really know much about, and we're there to help. So we do encourage people to come forward, and we use our materials in schools and communities. Okay, thank you. Oh, there's Roy. So he was the warrant officer. That's Roy Dickinson. And that's Bill. He come over. He's our Windrush generation. Bill, lovely fella. And this is Mr. Glasgow on ship. And it's just an example of some of the things that we start with. So it's just images, and then we build our stories based on what we find. Thank you very much.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And we hope that we can incorporate some of your slides in this book that we're producing for Wales for schools and teachers to use as resources. Thank you. I wondered whether the representative from Lesotho, would you like to say a few words, or are you happy just to participate and listen in? We want to make sure we've given you the opportunity to say just a few words if you would like to.
Thank you so much, Chair, for the platform. I don't know if my signal is perfect on your side.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chair. I would like to greet our heads of government, our excellencies, the Commonwealth community, and distinguished guests. On behalf of Lesotho, His Majesty King Lizzie III and the government of Lesotho, it is an honor and privilege to take part in this auspicious occasion presented by the Royal Commonwealth Society of Wales. The Commonwealth Commemoration Day is a significant historical event that embraces the commitment and dedication of many of our fallen heroes. On this day in Lesotho, a state-led ceremony and a military parade is conveyed in November of every year to celebrate, mark, and embrace the hardships of our fallen great soldiers who took part in the world wars. This is a symbolic, and we give gratitude to the families and friends of the good services their beloved ones have portrayed to the world on behalf of Lesotho. As we remember the World War, Lesotho, it was then Basotho land at the time, was one of the colonies of Great Britain, and it assigned over 20,000 men and women to assist the British Army. These men and women left their families to fight for a universal cause that laid the foundation to pivotal societal norms. Thousands of Basotho lives were lost in the war. Lesotho's role in the war was very significant because Lesotho also provided British Army with 24 Spitfire aircrafts that were used in the Second World War. For this, the British government gave Lesotho a significant symbolic stature of a Spitfire aircraft that is symbolic in the city center of Maseru, in the capital of Lesotho. It is these historic moments, ladies and gentlemen, that have influenced the world today. The Second World War gave rise to democracy and sovereignty of many of African countries. African countries attained independence, recognition, self-identity, and human dignity. The World War contributed to the formation of multilateralism. It broadened the Commonwealth as the epitome of multilateralism and gave rise to many of our universal organizations that recognize the existence of Africa. As we still implement new methodologies to furnish democracy, Lesotho, as a small state, has prioritized global engagement through the Commonwealth by implementing and adopting universal norms into the national law. These are the effects of the World War. Lesotho, as a developing country, has also sought to improve many sectors such as health, law, tourism, education, gender equality, and uphold the conventions laid in the Universal Vienna Conventions. As we remember our fallen heroes, ladies and gentlemen, we have to continue their legacy. We ought to protect and improve what they have worked towards. It is in these times of COVID-19 that the world, all countries of the world, have to come together, either be in the sphere of bilateralism or multilateralism. It is imperative that we find ways to improve our livelihoods in these times. Our climate and environment have changed. We all need communities of the world to come together and to deal with this predicament as a collective. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to, as I depart, to pass on Basotho's condolences to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and the royal family for their loss. His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was a man of integrity and wisdom. His legacy shall therefore live on. The Kingdom of Lesotho expresses undoubtable gratitude to the Commonwealth for this important enlightening occasion. The government of Lesotho renews its full commitment and value to the Commonwealth of Nations and its partners. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Representative from Lesotho, Nkopane Tabane. Thank you so much for your well-spoken words, full of emotion, full of passion, and due respect to all the people from your country who supported in the war effort. And thank you also for your condolences to His Royal Highness. I'm sure that the Lord Lieutenants present today will convey your condolences to Her Majesty the Queen. I'm going to appeal to you because we literally have 10 minutes to the end, because we had to include a few speeches towards the end. If you could just give us 10 minutes after to wrap up nicely. Can I warmly invite the Why Are West Indian Here project, who are a brilliant voluntary organization established in 2009. Their director, Horace Barnes, is here with Chris Campbell, and they're going to talk about the contributions of West Indians. Warmly welcome you to please power ahead. And if you can, just keep it brief and to the point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Uzu. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the time. We'll go straight into it. If I can share my screen and hopefully get to it as quickly as possible. We're the Why West Indian Project. We're based in the Midlands, and we stretch out all over the country. We're going to try and do a presentation. Hopefully people can hear me, and also give you a quick history lesson. We're looking at the Black Loyalists. These were played a major part in the American War of Independence. We're looking at the West Indian regiments. Britain had 12 West Indian regiments to fight against the Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars. This is one of Queen Victoria's West Indian regiments. She had 4 West Indian regiments. The question you have to ask yourself, why did Queen Victoria need 4 West Indians, and why did Britain need 12 West Indian regiments to fight in the Napoleonic Wars? As we proceed, this is one of the battle standards, which is signed by Victoria, Queen Victoria, on the corner. This is William Hall, Abel Simeon William Hall. He was out of Canada. It's a long story, but he's the first recipient, a black recipient of the Victoria Cross. William Gordon, West Indian Regiment, Victoria Cross. And the great Walter Toll here. Great story, fabulous man. We are pushing for his history, for his legacy, and Walter Toll there. There we go, one of the amazing guys from India, awarded the first Victoria Cross. Winston Millerton, he would serve in both World Wars for the British West Indian Regiment and in the Second World War also. The West Indian stories go on and on. This is a presentation of the new colours to the West Indian Regiment in 1921. We have a gentleman here, Johnny Smythe, Sierra Leone, again, another officer from the Indian Army in the First World War. Billy Strachan, bomber pilot, Royal Air Force, 1940, 1945. Again, Earl Beckford, he's probably about 95 years old now. As far as we know, he's still alive. He served in the First World War. This was mentioned by Warren Toff and Steve Purnham. Lillian Barder, fantastic story. Again, another Indian pilot from the Second World War, Mahendra Singh Punjab. Here we go. Philip Lewis, Ulrich Cross, also mentioned by Warren Toff as Purnham, one of the most decorated men in the area from our community. And again, here we go. We don't forget anybody. We are trying our best to reach out for many, many people. After the Second World War, Britain was in trouble, and again, they reached out for us to come, and we came in great numbers. Some of the guys that have served valiantly in the current services. These are some of our veterans. This gentleman is now a commander in the Royal Air Force. He stands against in aboard there with some of the heroes of the Second World War. Again, these are veterans. These are current serving people from our community who have basically done everything that they can do for our country and our Queen and our Empire. I'm hoping, if I can do it, is to get my the secretary of the Why West Indian project to come in and do a quick poem for everybody to do with the Great Walter Tour. I'm just trying to get this up now. Apologies for the delay. Come on. Sorry, I apologize. Sharon, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you just do the poem anyway, and I'll try my best to get this up, please. Thank you.
I will do. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a tribute to a man that you may have heard his name mentioned before. Walter Tull, a national hero. Yes, more people now agree that a military cross was undeniably earned, together with his place in history. This is Walter's story. He was born to a British mother, his father the son of a slave, enduring bigotry all his life. His loyalty to England never wavered. When he was 9, his father died. Just 2 years earlier, he'd lost his mother. His stepmom unable to cope, Walter was sent to an orphanage with his brother. Now, young Walter had a talent for football and was soon playing for the orphanage side. Later, a successful trial with an amateur club led to an apprenticeship being set aside. In 1909, he signed for Tottenham Hotspur, believed to be the first black outfield playing professional. A model player beyond reproach, an accolade for a black man, regrettably unacceptable. As football became the working man's sport, thousands attended every game, and Walter attracted unwanted attention, but never once did he complain. Racist chants and constant abuse resulted in his transfer to Northampton Town. But in 1914, he put his promising career on hold after volunteering to fight for England's crown. He joined the football battalion, and it wasn't long before the relevant department learned of Walter's leadership skills and promoted him to the rank of sergeant. His valour at the Somme offensive proved him to be a worthy leader, having time and again led the attack before succumbing to trench fever. Recovering at home in England, he fought the demons within. Fearing an honourable discharge awaited, he never imagined officer training would begin. He became one of Britain's first black British officers contravening military law. But then again, his bravery at the Italian front left his commanding officers in awe. He returned to the Western Front, an assignment from which he would never come back, as sadly Walter was killed by machine gun fire after leading the British attack. He made the ultimate sacrifice for a country he called home and was recommended for the Military Cross for the courage he had shown. His body was never recovered. Like thousands of others, he has no grave. But the saddest truth of all must be his award, never given for the service that he gave. 100 years on, Walter's legacy is clear to see, an inspirational role model for us all, regardless of creed or ethnicity. For he was a man who never gave up, who always strived to do his best. And for that, I pay tribute to you, Walter, and pray one day outstanding issues will be addressed. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Carry on. Carry on.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you, Professor Uzu. You've got the engagement team in Wales there that have done us proud. They really give us some masses of support. Chris Campbell, CCC, Race Council Cymru, and also South Wales Jamaica Society. Hope we see you soon. Please, everybody stay safe. God bless and protect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Horace Barnes. We look forward to celebrating so much more of your project and your work in Wales here. Thank you. May I now bring this event to a conclusion and thank every single community leader who just came here to listen. And may I thank all the Lord Lieutenants from across Wales who are here to represent the Queen at this event. May I thank all the grassroots communities, every individual from different ethnic communities. May I thank our judge, Ray Singh, who is on our screen now, who is the chair of Race Council Cymru and the first appointed Asian judge in Wales, the only one. So we need to do better here in Wales. And may I also thank all the ambassadors, the high commissioners, the representatives. Before we close, our chairperson, Rajira Verma, would really like our Lord Lieutenant in Cardiff give her tribute once again to Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, because Wi-Fi affected the original tribute. So without much ado, we warmly welcome Lord Lieutenant Marved Meredith to read on behalf of all the Lord Lieutenants of Wales. Diolch yn fawr. Can we see the Lord Lieutenant?
Okay. Sorry, apologies for the internet problems.
Oh, I think it's still happening.
Yes.
I think the Wi-Fi is still a bit poorly, but
is it becoming?
It's breaking up. It's breaking up consistently. I wonder if Judge Ray Singh then could just give a round of thank you to everybody. And on behalf of Rajira Verma, our chair, and all the members of the Commonwealth Society of Wales, including Shafali, including Debbie, Ayasa, myself, we thank you all for joining us today and hope you can send all your documentation to the Royal Commonwealth Society to include in the brochure that Race Council Cymru and Black History Wales are producing for schools. Over to you, Judge Singh, to just say a few final words and a tribute to His Royal Highness.
Thank you, Professor Yobi. My lords, Lord Lieutenants, honorable ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. What a contribution. It really has been excellent. As Uzo has reminded you, I am from Fiji, and I was so delighted to see so many Fijians who have been assisted by different bodies and also who are here in Wales, involved in one way or another. This really shows how important it is to have the Commonwealth of nations and to have that link. We have made such contribution, all of our ancestors from different parts of the country, of the world. And to hear Britain First saying that they want all the Black and Asians to be deported, and if they came into power, they will hang them, is disgraceful. And this is really an eye-opening ceremony occasion today. So I'd like to thank everyone for their contribution on behalf of Royal Commonwealth Society here in Wales and Race Council Cymru. So diolch yn fawr for all your contributions, and particularly Uzo for the excellent way you have presented the program. Well done.
Diolch yn fawr. Bye, everybody. If we could go to the overall view so that everyone can see everyone as we say final goodbyes, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. Greetings to your nations. You can unmute and say in your languages goodbye.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Thank you.
Diolch.
Correspondence. Thank you. Good racing.
Thank you.
Well done.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr. Lord Lieutenant Louise Fleet from Swansea. Bless you. Thank you. Okay.
Goodbye, family. Take care. God bless.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Is it just us left?
No, not quite. There's still 22 participants in the room. Thank you for staying with us, people.
Yeah.
Still, yep.